This year, I've been working on an application to help people tell stories with maps, visualization, and data. And I thought that this weekend's events in Minneapolis would be a good time to show a use case of how this could be used. And my audience today is mainly people who work in journalism, content creation, communications, but any newsroom doing any sort of digital transformation might be interested in this topic because it's all about how we can use new technology and new engineering approaches to build applications to help us do our jobs better, more efficiently, or at a higher professional standard or quality. So I have called this framing the story because I plan to use it to talk about different events. But today I want to talk about Minneapolis specifically. To catch everybody up over the weekend, there was another shooting with ICE. I'm going to play that video so that everyone can see it, and then I'll talk about the application from there. Here's the shooting.
Oh shit! What the fuck? They killed him? Did they fucking kill that guy? Are you fucking kidding me, dude? Not again! Are you fucking kidding me? That guy's dead. Yo, we need people on.
That was what people woke up to, and over the weekend, obviously, crowds grew and there were a lot of protests. Over the weekend, other social media posts came out revealing other angles of the shooting. I'm going to play a couple of those.
I need scissors. I need someone to cut this shit.
Okay, that of course was immediately after the shooting. I have another angle coming up immediately after. This is a breakdown of what happened frame by frame. And the last video is the reaction after.
We're going to hear. We got another situation here. Let's just listen in for a moment.
No! Fuck you! Stop! Look out! Down! Just chill. Okay. I'm fine. I didn't breathe anything. I'm just angry. I'm 7 years old. Fucking angry. Oh, fuck off. I think I'll need it, but we'll try it.
Wow.
When I created this application, what I'll be doing with it is providing context behind news events. And what I'm going to do during this talk is talk about the application, what it does. But for those who are interested, I'm going to talk about how I built it. So if you're interested in developing your own applications to do this sort of thing, you can understand, at least at a conceptual level, how it's all brought together. So I built this using an application called Replit. It's an education platform that allows you to do coding and create different API calls to different services in the background. And there's an engineering principle called mock that I've been taught to embrace that has been liberating for me in terms of just understanding and moving forward. Mock means microservices, APIs, cloud-based and headless. Mainly microservices. These are features that operate in the background that allow me to do things like look up locations, like where the shooting happened in Minneapolis. So this was where the video was shot out toward the street, Glam Doll Donuts. And I have just created it as a reference point in the app so that when I scroll in and out, you can see it. So this is an example of a microservice. It uses an API call to facilitate this to Google so that as I, build an application and put my data point on top, it knows where to go. But in the background, it's really seeking out a service to Google and facilitating this. The other thing I've done is place this application in the cloud, meaning if I'm logged in anywhere and I have access to the internet, I can use it. This is not for someone else, so I'm not allowing other people to log in. But if I wanted to, I could put it behind authentication and do that as well. And the other thing it is headless, meaning I've separated my front-end code from my back-end code, meaning if I ever want to relaunch this property and change something, let's say I have a client who wants to make this blue instead of black, I don't have to re-engineer the entire application. I can just switch out certain parts of it, like a Lego in a Lego stack. So what are you looking at? You're looking at Minneapolis, and I show you this in 2D map view. I've set up a point of reference to where the shooting happened over the weekend, but what I really want to show you is how if you work in a newsroom and you want to show this visualization in different ways, we can do that. So think of this as my base map. I've got a base map that shows all of the streets, the grids, it's green, it's yellow, it's this view. But if I want to change this base map, I have 20 set up here that I can switch to. And since I'm going to do a lot showing layers, I'm going to make this light gray so it's easier to see. So that's our point of interest where the shooting was. And I'm in 2D map mode. Other skins, they call it, I might want to use would be something like a historic style that would show this in a different way. But again, I'm going to use this light gray. And what I can do from this mode is really zoom in and get specific. And this is where the buildings come into view. And if you're in 3D mode, I'm going to show you that in a minute, this looks a whole lot different. But if what you're doing is creating a reference map for something like a marathon or a block party, it's easy enough to just create an application and then isolate out whatever base layer map you would want. Okay, so here is downtown Minneapolis that I'm circling. Here is where the shooting happened. And remember, this is a content and a storytelling platform, meaning I want to tell the story of what it means to understand content from 6 views. I want to be able to explain it in video, in images, in articles, in social posts, in audio playlists, and in a timeline. I could add to this, but these are the 6 content types I chose, and these are isolated over here. And I'm working on a side project about how communities respond after crises. And I'm using 2 case studies from my own past the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, which I covered as a legislative reporter, as well as the Oklahoma City bombing, which I covered when I was young as a journalist. So, looking at those two use cases, as well as Minneapolis's recovery after George Floyd, which I was based in Minneapolis, those three use cases give us sort of a prism to look at how communities react after crises. But right now, we're going through one in Minneapolis. So, what I want to be able to do is say, okay, I'm going to pinpoint a location, and then I'm going to tell the story in visuals. And like I did with slideshow or the social posts, I want to be able to organize them into lists so that the user can navigate them and play them on video like I'm doing today. If I have other things I want to showcase, like let's say the cover of the magazine or the headline of the Star Tribune over the weekend, I can do that easily. And I can also do call outs. So if I want to talk about this photo specifically, I can line it up and have that as a talking point for on air. I have created for other purposes, other parts of the project, timelines related to the Tulsa Race Massacre. I have not done so for Minneapolis, but the gist is to be able to isolate out in a content type sequence of events so that we could use that slideshow as collateral content for other things down the stream. So these are the ways I'm defining my content. And when it's set up in the back end, I'm literally just going into playlists that I've set up for these purposes. And I'm adding links to the playlists. So this is an example of a link. Here, you just paste in a URL and it assembles it, and then you organize it and rank it with the arrows. So this is an example of the timeline. Each event in the timeline is a different card. The card has values, date, title, description, and then I can put an order against each of these to make sure that they're ordering right in my slideshow object. So a lot of this is just basic atomic strategy. I've got other parts of the app that use AI where the system prompts are located will be here. I've got admin properties that control when and where the app loads and how, but let's focus on the map first. So I'm in 2D mode. I showed you everything related to the base, excuse me, everything related to the base map layer. Now, I want to see where this is related to transportation. And this is an example of a data layer where I'm bringing in information and putting it on top of my base map. So let's move the base map back to gray. Let's look at all active rail networks near this. And if I were to scroll out, these are all the rail networks that are near this point of interest. If I wanted to show speed limits, you can revise these and it can show the speed limits. So a lot of this is about transportations, planning, and logistics. But in a news context, this is important to communicate to audiences. I can also look at the highway system. So if I want to map out the U.S. interstate system, I can. I could add layers for state, interstate. I could look at hiking trails. I could look at aviation charts. Sky is the limit. But if you're doing a lot of digging, or if you're doing construction, or if you're doing any sort of explanation about what may be required from a permitting perspective, you might need to know what gas pipelines are in a region versus, let's see, let me clear out all my layers and say, well, let's table the gas and stuff because it's not really relevant to the use case today. All to say is I can bring in preset layers like this if I want to look at all the historic places in Minnesota. I can load up these data points in the background using API calls. The next thing I can do is load in data layers. So I've got a couple of methods to load in data from external sources, but an example would be, let's say I wanted to show all the homes that were in a specific area during a time span, like 1921. I've loaded up a sample historic district to show what that would look like. So if I went down to Tulsa, and if I wanted to look at what the city looked like back in 1921, I could load up those data points and display them on the map easily and then complement them with other data I would bring in, such as what area was burned. And I can look at a repository and get the raw information here at the link level. They provide a link, and then I could bring in other layer and show what area of Tulsa was burned in the race riot. So from a storytelling perspective, I'm trying to facilitate telling stories with content types, which you're going to see over to the right, but I want to be able to tell the story using visual data. And obviously loading data from third-party sources is very important. But the other thing we can do, let me just clear this out, and I'm going to refresh so I can get back to my spot in Minneapolis. Now I'm back in Minneapolis. And I want to be able to tell a story about where this location is within a larger context, like a county or a census area. So if you have a location and you want to know, is it a high crime area, then you would want to be able to use an application to say, okay, let's overlay these things on top of each other. So here, I'm going to load up Minnesota. I'm going to look at the census tract level, and I'm going to select total population so that you can understand how populated this area is. And if I were to scroll back, we can see the larger data load in, and I can see this is a moderately populated area. Oops, that's my overlay. And if I were interested in finding out more about the county itself, I could see this information and see total population, how many people are located in this area where the shooting took place. I can load in a lot of different variables for different purposes, but this is where it becomes a business requirements discussion as to actually what you're trying to do with the app. And because I'm trying to tell stories for clients who work across different industries for different purposes, you know, mine's all over the map. If I wanted to do scouting for healthcare jobs, I can spot and do marketing based on how many people hold those jobs in the area. But today we're focusing on news and storytelling about a location for an ongoing news story. So I'll limit the dialogue here. If you work in a newsroom, I'll clear this layer. visualizing things for audiences and mapping is huge, obviously. And we want to be able to do that in two ways. We want to be able to say, okay, we have a location in 2D. We want to be able to provide a base map that does all these things, but we also want to be able to switch over and look in satellite mode so that if we want to tell a story here, that we've got this as well. And let's just say Glam Doll Donuts, which is where that video was shot. This is that location, and I can set that on my map and see it so that I don't lose that in 3D mode as well. All right, so here's the location, the point of interest. I am in satellite mode, but I am still in 2D, meaning if I slant my map, everything is flat. Oh, the world is flat. And if I am actually going to go into 3D mode, then I am going to go over to 3D mode and change the layer. And this, you're going to see it switch out. I can still see my anchor point of Glam Doll Donuts, but if I tilt the camera, I can then see all my buildings in 3D mode. And this is going to be a lot of how we can tell storytelling with APIs for newsroom purposes without having to do things like drone shots or helicopters, because this is a 3D replication of downtown, and I've built in controls so that if I want to do a pan or a flyover, I can. We can do our own visual filters on top of this 3D map so that if I wanted to scroll back and say, put this in sepia versus infrared mode versus night vision mode, we can do that. This is all about how you want to tell your stories, but there's a lot built into these new software systems. And if you can figure out how to hook into them and you can figure out what you're trying to do with them, then you can really do some really cool things. So if we can do things like panning, orbiting, move it into high D mode so that you can do these, you can capture screen captures and do video capture out of these applications very, very easily and quickly. And I think this is where I'm excited, because if you look at what Dallas is doing with the World Cup coming up this year, and then you look at Oklahoma City having 2 of the Olympics events 2 years after that, location-based reporting is going to be very important for a bunch of people who've never visited this region before. So if we can tell those stories in different ways, we're all better off. Plus, it's fun. And let's talk about that piece of it. So how do you do research? How do you do ideation? Everybody uses ChatGPT now. I kind of do too a lot. But here, if I go back to 2D mode, let's go back into research mode. I wanted to be able to do location-based research pretty easily. So let me put this in the larger context of Minneapolis and why the reaction is in the streets what it is, because this has been 3 shootings that have taken place in the last few weeks, and all of it's near where George Floyd was murdered, setting off the riots. And I'm going to provide so this is George Floyd Square, and if you were to scroll in, this has become an area of interest in the community. There's a sculpture here, and if you were to go into 3D mode and look at a lot of this stuff. This is what the area looks like. There's a sculpture in the middle with a raised fist. There's all murals. It is an area of community. You can see painted sidewalks all over the street because of what the city went through. And if you look at this in 3D mode, you get an understanding of where George Floyd Square is related to downtown. And I could still pan through here and capture this. And if we wanted to go at higher speeds, we could. Looks like an old HBO special. Oh wait, is that right? That's not right. Well, anyway. So that's just one of the things we can do. I could also, if I'm interested in finding out about George Floyd the person, build in research so I could integrate with Wikipedia. And then if I was interested in finding out George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, I could add these as a research topic and then do research based on this in the application. And I'll say again, this isn't the most stylized because I was doing it for my own purposes, but if I want to brief about a location, history, what it is, these are those things that are controlled in the back end through those prompts. So this is a person brief that I control through a system prompt, and then I've built in integrations to things like YouTube, Wikipedia, New York Times archives, just to make my own research easier. And I think because I have a lot of background in news and I have a lot of subscriptions and I know development, the API stuff is easy just to stitch things together in the background. And I'll just say this, you can use these too, because if you can understand how all these things are put together, even at the conceptual level, there's a lot of software system out there that do this for you, that put these pieces together. But you have to know what you want to do, and that is the requirements part of this. So we can do the research. We can change how this camera looks and feels. I could locate something in an area, and I could discover places based on the search and then add it to the database, so it really becomes location specific, city specific. But it really does mean that when you have an event like what happened over the weekend, there's just a way to tell these stories differently that involve mapping, that involve layers, that involve different content types. And if we can start to capture that, then we can provide context behind the news as well as the breaking news. Thanks for listening.